Greetings and a very warm welcome to GlobalSBM Business Talk. Today, we are excited to welcome Ms. Chelsea as our guest speaker. Ms. Chelsea recently completed BA in neuroscience, focusing on the scientific aspect of mind-body connection. Combining her scientific and spiritual knowledge, she is developing a protocol to alleviate the psychosomatic symptoms. By applying this technique, known as tapping or emotional freedom technique, one can identify, acknowledge, and release trapped emotions in the body to allow themselves to begin healing. Thank you so much for joining us, Chelsea, and we are excited to hear from you.
Excellent. Thank you so much for having me. Let me just give me a second to share my screen. Okay. So today I'm going to be talking about the entrepreneur's mindset and how to make sure that you are in line. It's moving on its own. Hold on. Give me 1 second. Don't know why I did that. Okay, back to the beginning. So I am here to talk to you about how to get aligned with your business and make sure that your mindset isn't holding you back from your goals as an entrepreneur or whatever workforce career that you choose. Okay, so now we click and move to the next slide. All right. So a little bit about my background is I actually owned and operated a medical spa here in the United States. And I ran that from 2014 until 2018. I had medical complications and I actually needed to take a step back from the procedures that I was doing. And that led me to a program at MIT and Harvard Medical School, where I learned about healthcare innovation or healthcare entrepreneurship back in 2018. I then went on to get my bachelor's of science, which I did not have before. I had a specialized medical license in neuroscience, and I recently just completed that. So tying this all in, I wanted to kind of share my journey because it's a little bit on the slower side for entrepreneurs. A lot of times, and I know this for myself with running my med spa, is you get an idea and you're like, I want to launch tomorrow. I want to do this. I have to do this now. And sometimes you cut corners a little bit. So when I first opened my medical spa, I had just moved back to the town that I pretty much grew up in. And I had the opportunity to either work for somebody else or work for myself. And I was like, you know what? I'm going to go work for myself. I'm done with kind of like the toxic office politics, and I want to do my own thing. I come from a family of entrepreneurs, so this wasn't really far-fetched. But what I ended up doing, because I was in such a rush, is I did cut corners in the sense of when I was setting up my business, I didn't plan or like put processes in place to hire people. So basically, for those 4 years, I was what's called a solo entrepreneur. So I was not only making my own schedule, scheduling my patients, I was taking care of all the patients. I was doing social media, I was doing accounting, I was doing everything myself. And I was successful. I ended up being too busy. My first thought process was, let me just open and then I can put these processes in place. But I ended up, being too busy and it never happened. And so when I had a medical injury, I didn't have anyone there to continue operating my business. So I had to try to find somebody that had the same medical license as me to cover my patients. Their availability wasn't as open as mine. Now, I pretty much only worked part-time. I worked about 20 hours with patients. I made a good enough living. This is when I started working on my mindset. So I started off my first year doing like something small, like $1,200 to $2,000 a month, started working on this mindset that I'm going to talk to you about today. And I went from $1,200 to $2,000 a month to $5,000 to $10,000 to $12,000. So I was consistently hitting, 5 figures a month, with only working about 20 hours with patients. The rest of my time was spent, I worked with a medical association. I was vice president of a medical association. I traveled a lot. I did some networking. And the remaining time, I, just kind of chilled, did some social media. But like I said, I was not prepared. Towards the beginning and middle of 2017, when things really started jumping off, I actually had investors willing to basically invest about $1 million in medical equipment. The lasers that I used were roughly anywhere between $150,000 to $500,000. And so if I wanted to take my business to the next level and start hiring people, I needed a support staff so that I wasn't the only one doing everything, wearing all the hats, and, and that I could expand and it could be sustainable. Now, like I said, I ended up having a medical injury. I had to take a step back and I found somebody to cover me. And I came to a point, why I'm telling you this is because I came to a point where I could either get back into it after I had my surgeries. Okay, I could either get back into it, take the investors' money, and run $1 million practice, or I could pivot. And before my injury, I had basically been specializing with patients with endocrine disorders that manifested through their skin. So either they had excess hair growth or they had, acne or blemishes. And I started noticing these similarities between my patients that had these chronic conditions, that even with medication or supplements, their symptoms didn't quite go away. It was never quite fixed. The doctors never got to like the root cause. And so I started noticing similarities in the stories that they were telling me. And I noticed that a lot of them had, limiting beliefs or, trauma, not necessarily like, big T trauma, but maybe something small of just like beliefs in themselves, people being negative in their life, certain instances happening. And I noticed this pattern, and it made me begin to think, because I was using a technique called emotional freedom technique, that if you could reverse engineer the diagnosis process and peel back those layers and get to the root emotional cause before the patient had any physical symptoms, is maybe you could actually have a chance of correcting and healing the condition. So I ended up going to a medical conference in Vegas after I'd had already taken a step back from work and was debating, do I take the investors' money or do I pivot and do something completely different that is not heard of yet? And I went to this conference and I was kind of like, this isn't for me anymore. I don't feel aligned with it. And the reason I'm telling you this is that sometimes things don't make sense. Sometimes things aren't linear, and you just have to trust your gut. Something in my gut was telling me, leave the medical cosmetic, medicine behind and do something else, do this. So literally a month after I decided that, I got accepted to the MIT Harvard Medical School Healthcare Innovation Bootcamp. And for that program, I had to pitch my business idea. I was super scared because I practice medicine in Cleveland, where everything is very traditional medicine. It's very Western medicine. There's not a lot of room for, holistic work unless you're at a private practice. It sometimes was frowned upon, and people some of my colleagues would be like, oh no, like give them medicine, they're fine, but luckily I do have like a good support of doctors that I met. They're like, yeah, we're just as frustrated when our patients aren't getting better because we're doing everything by the book. And we know for sure that there is some sort of emotional root cause that started, something that happened before they started experiencing these physical symptoms. And so I planted that seed. I made that decision against my family and friends' better judgment, who are like, no, just stick with what you know. You've been doing this for 10 years. I'm like, I'm going to do something completely different in my 30s. And so I got accepted. It was their inaugural class. There was only 80 people worldwide. It was like a 2% acceptance rate. And from then on, I feel like I have not stopped to an extent. Like things just keep happening that confirm that I'm on the right path with my business. So after the boot camp, I realized that I wanted to, for myself, understand better the scientific aspect of the mind-body connection. So how do your thoughts and emotions affect your physical body? And so I decided to go back to school. I had never completed my bachelor's, and I felt that this was the time and that neuroscience would give me the best well-rounded experience to understand what's going on in your brain, how is it connected to your body, and how can I apply this to my future venture. During my work at Temple University, where I did my neuroscience degree, I also had a focus in industrial organizational psychology and organizational behavioral management, OBM, which I personally enjoyed. I know a lot of you are MBA students, and sometimes they have these courses at MBA colleges. I love it because I got to get back in touch with my entrepreneur spirit and business. And you learn more about like the scientific aspect of like creating your personas, your ideal customers, how to identify like kinks in your work process and overcome that using like tried and true scientific procedures. So I would definitely recommend that to anybody if you guys do have that course. And then I also worked over at the business school. I worked in a research lab there. It was a Center for Applied Decision Making, the CART lab. And we would do marketing and behavior analysis and scan people in the fMRI. And so it was kind of along the lines of, what's going on in the brain versus like what you're saying and thinking. So yeah, I wanted to kind of draw something for you guys, and I apologize. Zoom drawing is always horrible. When I TA'd last semester, I used to apologize to my students. But one last point with going back for my bachelor's is I want to let you guys know, because I know you guys are in school, and for those 3 years, I felt stuck. I felt like I wasn't making any progress because I am an entrepreneur at heart. I am like a go, go, go. What's my next goal? Achieve it. And I felt like I definitely had to take a step back. And though I, constantly told myself like, you're moving forward. And other people told me like, you are moving forward. You're getting a degree. You're learning stuff that supports your business. 3 years out of my life, I felt like, when I would get frustrated with school, which we all know school is frustrating, I would get like very stuck. I'd be like, I could be making money. I could be sharing my idea with the world. I could be helping people right now. And I'm stuck here reading this stupid textbook that I have no interest in, because it would be like one of those chapters that you're like, I'm completely just detached from this. So I want to let you guys know that as students, I understand your frustration. I understand that feeling stuck, and I understand that like I want to create it now. I have to have it now. If I don't launch now, someone's going to beat me to market. Well, guess what? let somebody beat you to market and just come in with a more superior product. But it's completely normal to feel stuck when you're in school, especially when you have like these ideas ruminating. So the little visual I have, and like I said, this is Zoom drawing is never great, is, back in 2017, I planted the seed, okay? And, and then I went to Harvard Medical School and MIT, and the roots kind of started growing. Okay, right here. And 3 years later, I have all this additional knowledge that branches off of these already growing roots, supporting it. Some of them might end here. But now that I've graduated and I just started working on my business plan, I have my cute little leaf. So it takes time. So if you feel rushed, just remember that you're planting the seed. Having an idea just in itself is planting the seed. The steps you take after that, it's growing. And you might not see the fruits of your labor. Other people might not see it. I can't tell you how many times people are like, oh, well, you don't actually have a business yet. And it's like, no, but like it's growing. It's growing. You can't see it. I can't see it, but it's growing, and now I have just like the start of a little plant. So, all right, let me clear that. Okay. So let's talk about my current venture that I just started, but has been planted since 2017. Is I am creating a protocol to alleviate the psychosomatic symptoms associated with chronic illness. So, and a lot of times people think, oh, psychosomatic symptoms, that means that it's all in your head. Well, guess what? Yeah, it is. But where does it stem from? It stems from your thoughts. It stems from your beliefs. It stems from your experiences. So my plan is to actually reverse engineer the diagnosis process. So going through, the symptoms that you have, because a lot of times people get diagnosed with something, they go over to WebMD, they look up, they only have 3 symptoms, all of a sudden they look up 12 symptoms, and it plants another seed in your subconscious. And all of a sudden you might get a symptom, it might be related, it might not. And then you're like, confirmation bias, okay, I'm getting worse. So going through the symptoms, going through your doctor's appointments. I am pro most doctors. I believe that doctors are healers. I believe that they got into medicine to try to help people, whether or not the hospital corporations have killed that dream. It varies by individual, but doctors, like I said before, are just as frustrated when they're following protocol and their patient is not getting any better. Okay, so, but doctors are also humans. So sometimes they are busy, they're in their own head, they have their own things going on. Sometimes they do gaslight patients. Sometimes they dismiss symptoms. Sometimes they misdiagnose you. Sometimes they give you a medication and they can't predict whether or not that medication is going to work for you, whether you're going to have side effects or not. So we need to go through and do the appointments, do misdiagnosis, do side effects for medication. We also will be addressing, family and friend beliefs. A lot of times when people don't feel well, you get negative feedback from your family. It's either you could come from like a tough family that's like, oh, just suck it up, it's not that bad, or like, why are you complaining? Different things. And that all these experiences snowball on top of what physical symptoms you were already experiencing. So it's almost nearly impossible to get better if you're just like adding on more and more emotional damage. So if we can reverse engineer that, we have a clearer picture of, how to get to what experience did you have at the time or right before you had your first physical symptom. And if you can get to that, you can start healing your body. So the modality that I'm going to be using is a self-acupressure technique. It's called emotional freedom technique, EFT, or tapping. It's currently being clinically researched at Bond University in Australia, and I'll talk more about that. And for right now, I want to start with a self-paced online course where, because every person's experience is different, they will need to go through, I will have set lessons of, like list your symptoms, okay? And then tap on that. List your memories from doctor's experience, list your medication side effects, list the experiences that you've had with your family and friends not believing you, or even you not, people gaslight themselves, even you not believing yourself. And, and start there. So what my future goals are is I'm planning to launch my online course by in January of 2023. So I just turned in my thesis and I'm starting my business. And basically my plan is to start batching content. So working on like the SEO and the blogs and social media. I like to, one technique I've learned from having my medical spa is to batch content. And what I mean by that is prepare at least a month, if not 3 to 6 months worth of content, worth of blogs, worth of social media posts, I'm being tongue-tied, worth of videos, so that you have them prepared, because life happens. The reason that a lot of people don't succeed in social media, or even like getting their blog up on the ratings for Google, is because they're not consistent, because life happens. If I had to remember to post every single day, I would forget, or I'd be posting at like 11 o'clock at night, because life happens. So you want to prepare and have everything written before you even launch. So this is part of my process of like making sure I'm prepared before I even start my business, as opposed to when I did my medical spa. I'll also be doing, some SOP so that I can hire in interns and have a support system this time. So my plan is to actually start, when you do SEO, you want to post consistently for 3 months, same day, same time, in order to beat those Google Analytics rankings, okay? So I'll start in September, I'll batch everything this summer, work on my business plan, get my interns, and start posting everything 3 months before I even do my first ask, before I even say, hey guys, I have a course, because I'm creating content. I'm giving people information. I'm giving people the tools. And it's up to them then, if they want it in like an organized fashion with like some support, to do it in an online course. So basically your blogs act as a funnel. You have your blogs, you're doing free content, and then those lead to either eventually you can create a book, which will also funnel into your course. So it's like you're giving them mini lessons in your blog, which is linked also to your social media. And then that funnels in, hey, do you want this in an organized fashion with support? Come pay for my online course. Okay, and have everything in front of you, have a checklist, have other people that are going through the same thing that you can talk to in like a Facebook group. But this takes time. And some people, they launch way too fast and they haven't built up that trust with their audience, and they haven't given people enough reason to trust them. I noticed that a lot on social media now is, like I was looking into like Amazon FBA, and it's like all these people are like, oh yeah, like I made this much money and you can too. But like, that's it. They're like, oh, buy my online course and stuff. And it's like, but you're not going to give me like some sort of sneak peek into how you did it. Because the truth is people don't really do things themselves. You can give them your entire course in a blog, but unless it's organized in front of them and they pay, which holds them accountable, most people don't really do it like through and through. And you want to give them enough content and enough steps to be taken where they do see results, but they want you to take them to the next step. So that is my goal to launch in 2023, January of 2023. My second goal is to hit 6 figures in my first year. I haven't gone through my pricing, but it's doable. Given my experience and given the mindset work that I'm going to be doing, it is doable to hit 6 figures in my first year. And third is, and this is like my biggest one, is I want to host a wellness retreat. So not only just doing these online courses, but then branching out and doing like 2 a year. My first one I want to do in Costa Rica. I have family from there, my dad's side, and host a wellness retreat where people come, they have, a tropical experience. We do some yoga, we do some meditation, we do some tapping, and we work through, it's more intensive, so that's that next step up from the online course. I would say my goal after that would be to have one over in Bali. So starting over here on my side of the world in Costa Rica and moving over to Bali. So you might be looking at these and being like, these are some pretty big goals, or you might not, but to me, these are big goals. So how am I going to achieve these? And the key thing is without getting in my own way. Okay. So I've used this with my business. This is how I went from $1,200 to $5,000 to $10,000 to $12,000 is I used emotional freedom technique, or EFT. Okay. It's also known as tapping. There's been extensive clinical research conducted at Bond University. Predominantly, the researcher behind all of this is Dr. Peta Stapleton. We also have some researchers in the United States. That is Dr. Dawson Church. He's a chiropractor. But Dr. Peta Stapleton in Australia is the one who's actually working with medical associations in order to get this actually approved as a modality to treat patients with, because right now it's not under any governing board. Anyone can do it. You can do it at home. You can do it with a practitioner. Practitioners only have to go through training. I've done 2 levels of the training out of the 3. And basically it's comparable if you're familiar, it's being proven to be comparable to like cognitive behavioral therapy, CBT, as effective EMDR, which is rapid eye movement. So some studies that Peta Stapleton has done, and she does more medical because she's focusing on getting this medical approval. So she has done studies with eating disorders that have been going back 20 years, where people it's not just under eating, it's overeating. PTSD, especially in veterans. HbA1c levels have lowered. Stress, anxiety, and depression have all lowered. And they use fMRI scans as well to kind of measure this, not only, on top of getting the participant to kind of self-rate. So the key to emotional freedom technique is that we are identifying, acknowledging, and releasing emotions or limiting beliefs. Okay. So what I used to explain to my patients, and it's kind of been talked about, there's a book called The Body Keeps Score, and it's about trauma. And when I refer to trauma, it's big T or small t. It could be a little trauma. It could be just somebody saying a snide comment to you and your brain processes it. It's just kind of something you remember. It kind of like sets the tone. So we tend to hold our emotions in our bodies, and we tend to have patterns of where we hold them. So a lot of people either hold them in like their stomach or their chest or their throat or their head. So where you're holding them, and people usually automatically know, you guys are probably even thinking like, yeah, I usually feel it like in my chest or somewhere, is that's where you tend to have health problems. Okay, so if it's like in your throat, it might be like thyroid. In your chest, it could be like breast cancer, heart disease, lung problems, stomach. It could be, you know, digestive issues. It could be reproductive issues. And I kind of explained it to my patients as like, you're holding these emotions, which shows up on scans as inflammation around your organs. And it's like battery acid around your organs. So if you don't clear it, if you don't get rid of it, it's just going to eat away at that area. And it is going to cause health problems. So that's why it's so important to identify, acknowledge, and then release these emotions or limiting beliefs. So how it works is you have a setup statement and then 8 acupressure points. So the acupressure points are your inner eyebrow, your outer eyebrow, under the eye, above the lip, below the lip, your collarbone. We call this the monkey point because you look funny, you look like a monkey. Or it could just be like your side. And then the top of your head, okay? So, and when you do the setup statement, you tap on the side of your hand here. And I'll go through this a little bit more. I'm actually gonna ask for a volunteer just to prepare you guys. But the best way, you can do a generic tap and just like tap on something or follow along on a video. There's tons of video on EFT on YouTube. There's tons of ones for business on there. Just Google EFT and whatever business issue you come up against. But to really, I find the most effective way and the most clinical way is you prepare by you first identify what emotion you have or belief. Okay, so like, is it anxiety or is it like, I don't feel like I deserve this? Okay, and then you rate the intensity. You rate it on a scale of 1 to 10. So how strong are you feeling this? Going even deeper, it's good to locate it in your body. So where in your body are you feeling it? Is it your stomach? Is it your chest? Is it your hands? Like some people get tingly hands. Give it a color. Give it a feeling. Is it tingly? Is it prickly? Do you feel like you're being like wrung out? Do you feel like there's like a knot going on in there? And so how you start is with the setup is you say, even though I have anxiety, I deeply and completely love and accept myself. So I'm going to ask for a volunteer at this point. If anyone wants to raise their hands, and I can give an example. Okay, I don't see any hands. Nobody wants to do it? That's fine. Okay, so I will give an example of just anxiety. Okay, so I'm identifying that I had anxiety before giving this speech. Okay, I would rate it as a 9. I felt it probably throughout my arms, and it was tingly, it was a little bit red. And so this is how you would approach it. So you go, even though I have this anxiety, I deeply and completely love and accept myself. Even though my anxiety is a level 9, I deeply and completely love and accept myself. Even though I feel this tingling in my hands, this red feeling from the anxiety, I deeply and completely love and accept myself. And then you'd go through and tap and you'd say, this anxiety, I have this anxiety. I feel anxiety in my body. It's a level 9 in intensity. This anxiety in my body, this anxiety in my hands, this tingle in my hands, this anxiety. And it actually does calm your like fight or flight, and it helps relax your body. And you do a few rounds of that, and then at the end, you go back and you rate, you see where you are in your rating of intensity. Typically, you want to get to like at least a 3. Keep going until you get at least a 3. Sometimes the feeling moves in your body. Sometimes it can, like a lot of times with me, it kind of like moves up from my arms to my chest, to my throat, and then kind of like out. So that is how you tap. And so I'm sure by now your question is, how do we apply this to business? Okay, this chick just keeps talking about medical stuff and psychosomatic and energy healing and all that. When is she going to get to the business stuff? Okay, so how do we apply this to business? Well, we are going to focus, we're going to do like a little mini workshop and talk about our limiting beliefs, our work memories, our upper limit, and our goals, and then how to apply this to overcome these obstacles. So first, we're going to start with limiting beliefs. I like to define limiting beliefs as a belief that hinders progress or openness to opportunities in your life. So it's something, typically your beliefs are instilled in you by the time you're 8 years old, but you can have subsequent experiences that kind of trigger you, and it usually trickles down to your childhood. But these beliefs, they're going to hold you back in life. These are your kind of like, if you have like an angel and a devil on your shoulders, it's kind of like the devil being like, no, you can't do this. Why do you think you can do this? So my question, and if you guys feel more comfortable using the chat, please share your experiences in the chat. If not, write them down at home on a piece of paper. Is what beliefs do you have around work? Some examples that I've given are, a lot of people believe that entrepreneurs work more hours than normal people. That's a limiting belief, because I know entrepreneurs who make 7 figures that only work 10 hours a week. Now, they busted their ass to get there, and they didn't start at that, but now they have families and they want to travel, and they want to, they set up their business in order to, kind of have like more evergreen courses and have more residual income. And so that is a limiting belief. You can work as many or as few hours as you want. So, and you can still be just as abundant if you apply certain mindset practices and you release these limiting beliefs. Another example that I have is, I have to pay my dues before I can make good money. Now, in some industries, this is true, but I feel like this is a little bit more of like an old school kind of, our parents' age of like hustle, hustle, hustle. I have to work 70, 80 hours in order to show that I'm serious at work. And frankly, like, that's kind of BS, because if you know what you're talking about, if you're trained, if you are a quick learner, why do you have to climb the ladder? Why can't you just take a step up? So, oh, excellent. So Manish says flexibility in working helps be more productive. Okay, so is that a limiting belief, or is that a statement? I just want to ask real quick. Okay, so yeah, so some people do believe this. I believe this. I believe that flexibility helps me be more productive, because I have times where I'm like in the zone, and sometimes I can't get anything done. But some people think that if you don't have that strict 9 to 5, that you're not going to be productive. Some people think that if you're not in the office, you're not going to be productive. If you're working from home, it varies by person. So that is a great limiting belief. Sustainability. Yeah, a lot of people have limiting beliefs about sustainability. Some people think like, oh, I'm going to kill myself working 80 hours a week. And some people are like, that's not sustainable. but they're like, I'm going to do it because I only have to do it for 2 years and I'll be fine. So these are very personal. A lot of times we do have patterns, especially among like families or cultures or communities. But a lot of our limiting beliefs have been formed around the people, that we heard from the people when we were children, and then growing up from there. So thank you guys so much for your examples. So next, we're going to talk about work memories. So these are big ones to clear because your memories, your experiences, they influence your thoughts, your feelings, and your behaviors. Okay. So most of us, if you're an MBA program or a PhD or, DBA, you've worked at some point in your life. Or if you haven't, you've heard stuff from your family members. Okay. So look for patterns. Look what you allow in your life. I know sometimes people take a little bit of offense to that, but it's kind of more of like a learning experience. Like when I was younger, I had bad experiences with my bosses I feel like they took advantage of me because I was younger. They paid me less. They wanted me to work more hours. They wanted me to cover other people's shifts. And if I didn't, say yes, then they kind of did that. But it was more like I didn't value my worth yet, and I didn't have boundaries. Okay. So look for patterns and look at how it shaped you, look at how you grew, but also look at where you held yourself back. Okay. So some examples, and if you feel free to also use the chat to give some examples of like bad work experiences that you've had that like you still remember is, okay, so my examples are, I felt underappreciated by my boss for the hard work that I put in. I felt like I was busting my butt and going above and beyond and picking up other people's shifts and doing, outside of my job scope. And I got zero acknowledgement. If anything, I got, negative feedback from, when I didn't perform at the over the top. So, that shaped me. That's part of the reason why I wanted to work for myself. So another common one would be what your family says. Families, they can be judgy. They can be, they put their 2 cents in, trust me, they put their 2 cents in without you even asking. So, if you come from a family that your dad worked 60 to 80 hours just to put food on the table, they're going to probably think that you don't work enough. And they'll tell you, and then you might have like a mom that was like a stay-at-home mom that's like, you're working too much, like you're going to run yourself dry. So it's like you can't win, it's like you're getting it from both sides. My third example, which I think really shapes people, and I put this in because I don't know if it's in the air or something, but a lot of my friends have been calling me and being like, I've been having problems with a coworker. This person is trying to sabotage me. They can't even do my job. Like, we've all worked with that one bitter person that thinks that they can do their job better than you and like throws you under the bus in meetings or, just takes your idea or, and credits them for themselves. And it's like, it shapes you because you can have this once. And like, I call this like a small trauma, like a small T trauma is like, you have this bad coworker that's throwing you under the bus, that's trying to take your job, that's taking credit for your stuff. And even if you change jobs, you have these great people, like in the back of your mind, you're like, is this going to happen again? Can I trust this person? Even if you're in a new situation. So identifying, I really encourage everybody to go ahead and write down right now 5 examples of bad work memories that you have. And then, like I said, if you want to share in the chat, go for it. But use the tapping technique after. I'm I swear to God, you try it once on like your own issue and you'll be hooked. It actually really does work. But write down. So, I mean, if you don't sort through these and release them now, you could be at the top of your game, and this comes back and it sabotages you, which is what we're going to talk about next. Okay. So what is next is, it's called the upper limit, and it's based on research that was done at Stanford by this author here, Gay Hendricks, and I highly, highly recommend this book, The Big Leap. I make all of my mentees read this book. It is absolutely phenomenal. I love Gay Hendricks. I sat in, he's still going strong. He's like 70 or 80, so cute. He does these little workshops with his wife, and they get on and they dance, and it's like the cutest thing. But he still knows what he's talking about. Highly, highly recommend it. So in this book, he talks about what is your upper limit. It's sometimes known as like your glass ceiling. I like to refer to it as your subconscious sabotage. So it's kind of like the old saying, like waiting for the other shoe to drop, or, you know, when the good gets going, kind of something bad happens. So my question for you is, how much is too much? And the reason I bring up the upper limit is when I was working in my medical spa, I would do these treatments on patients that were like sometimes like an hour, 2 hours, 3 hours long. And some of my patients were like executives at Fortune 500 companies. So, I mean, they were successful, they were making money, but guess what? They still had limiting beliefs around money and around success and around work. And so whenever I ask them, like, hey, you know, like, what's your block around money? What's your limiting belief around money or success? And you'll get people who are like, oh, I don't have any. They're like, no, I'm good. I don't have any. And I'm like, everybody does. Everybody has some sort of limiting belief or block around this. So I started asking, especially to these corporate execs, I'm like, okay. I'm like, so how many hours are you working now? I was like, I don't know, like 60. I'm like, you know, I didn't ask them their actual salary, but I'm like, okay, think of your salary. I'm like, do you feel comfortable making that? Because some people do not. Some people, you know, especially there's different income levels. They say like, especially in entrepreneurship, it's like your first level is like 40 to 60,000, then your next is like 100,000, and then like 200, 500, a million. Okay. So, and one of my business coaches says new level, new devil, meaning that every time you hit that next level, there's more shit for you to uncover. Basically, there's more emotional like beliefs and limiting beliefs and blocks that you need to declutter from your brain. Okay, because otherwise you're going to subconsciously sabotage yourself, which is what Gay Hendricks talks about. Okay, so think of how many hours you're working. Think of how much you're making. Okay, what do you feel? Do you feel uncomfortable? Do you get a little squeamish? You know, and so I'll use an example. So one of my patients, she was a vice president in engineering at a Fortune 100 company. And she's like, I'm totally fine making what I make. She's like, some people at work don't feel that I should be making it because like I'm new at the company, I'm a woman. And I'm like, okay, so how many hours are you working? She's like 60. I'm like, all right, what happens if you work 50 hours? She's like, no. She's like, I can't do that. She goes, people are already mad because I'm a woman, I'm making X amount of money, and, you know, I'm new to the company. I can't cut down my hours. I'm like, that is your upper limit. If you cut down your hours by 10 hours a week, I go, you're going to think that you don't deserve it. You're going to think it's too good to be true. You're going to let other people's beliefs impose on your own progress, and you'll somehow sabotage yourself. Gay Hendricks talks about we sabotage ourselves in different ways, whether it's our relationships, okay, whether it's our health, whether it's our family, whether it's our job, people will start drinking, people will start picking fights, people will start getting like chronic migraines and stuff. And it's all because they don't truly believe that they deserve to make as much money as they do from where they want to do it for how many hours with whatever experience they have. And so you can apply this tapping. It's literally just as simple as that, of being like, even though I don't believe that I can make 6 figures only working 10 hours a week, I love and completely accept myself. And you do that 3 times. You say, sorry, you start with here, like, this is too much. Something bad's going to happen. You list your fears, like, my husband's going to leave me. I'm going to get fired. My coworkers are going to hate me. And you go through the sequence, and you might have to do it a couple times. And sometimes other beliefs come up, like I say, usually from childhood. Going back to like those limiting beliefs is what ends up coming up, and you push through it, you release it, and then you see that like possibilities end up coming your way, possibilities that you didn't think of, because you're now more aligned with what you were so afraid of before. All right, so lastly, I really want to emphasize this one. This is my favorite one, is goal setting. So this is pretty shocking. A business coach of mine who does 7 figures and only works 10 hours now. She started at like 30 hours a week and is now down to 10. She has online courses and books. So she found a research study that actually found only 80% of people, this is a typo. This should say 80% of people do not have goals, which when I first heard this, I was astonished. I was absolutely astonished. I was like, are you kidding me? Like, how do people not have goals in their life? So I actually started asking people when I would go on dates. I'd be like, what are your goals? And because I didn't believe that like not 80% of people did not have goals. Okay. A lot of people I went on dates with, they did not have goals. And I was like, next, sorry. Like, I can't be with somebody that doesn't have goals. You are all in MBA and DBA and PhDs. You guys have goals. Your goal is to graduate. Okay. So you at least have one goal. Pat yourself on the back. Okay, so even more astonishing is 16% of people, they have goals, but they don't write them down. And the reason we're talking about writing them down is there is science behind this. Okay, there is science about putting pen to paper, not typing it on your computer, not writing it on your iPad, unless you have like one of those paper covers like I do, which does help. Because our brains, when you're writing it, you're feeling the paper. Okay, so you're using touch. You're also using your vision. You're also seeing it. Okay. When I take it a step further, I like to speak it out loud. Okay. That way you hear it too. Use as many senses as you can. When you really goal set, you want to close your eyes. You want to envision how you would feel if you achieve that goal. Like, what do you smell? Who's there? What do you hear? How do you feel? Where do you feel in your body? Like, really encompass all of your senses. That really is like one of the keys to goal setting. But, writing it down, they've done studies with learning. It cements more in your head. Okay. I've read that writing something down is the equivalent of reading something 10 times. And then when you speak it, you hear it and it processes in your brain a little different as well. But you also, I feel, gain clarity when you're writing things down and speaking it, because we have all these thoughts in our head, but they're kind of all just jumbled. So you're really gaining clarity. This is why you write down your business plan. This is why you write down the steps that you want to take, is because like anyone can just throw stuff off their tongue, but there's something like very, very permanent about writing it down, even if it's not permanent. So yeah, so I really encourage writing it down. So 4% of people do write down their goals, okay? But only 1% of people write down their goals and regularly review them. And these people are among the highest achievers. So they say, this is just a saying, I'm not sure if it's scientifically sound, but that millionaires review their goals every day and billionaires review their goals multiple times a day. And when I had my medical spa, I do this every year, but I write down about 100 goals every year. Not all of them do I achieve, but I would write down my money goals and how much money I wanted to make in my practice. And every single day, I would write down the total of how much I made. And then I would total it in the week, I would total in the month. So I had I had a yearly goal, and I broke that down into 12 months. So I had monthly goals, I had weekly goals, and I had daily goals. This is what corporations do. I used to work in corporate retail. This is exactly what they do. So once you actually start your business and get it up and running, you can use last year's sales projections to do this and then like compare it. And you also see where your slow times are so you can run promotions. Just a little tip. But when I did this in my business, I saw a huge increase in my profits. On the flip side, when I would get too busy and I wouldn't do this, my sales would start to go down. So I believe that this is like a really important step. I love goal setting. It's kind of like a hobby for me. Strongly encourage it. Write it down though. Get those goals out of your head. Nobody needs to see your goal list. Just write it down. And then once you write it down, ask yourself, why won't this goal come true? You know, like you can think of, well, if I hit 6 figures, my family is going to start asking me for money. Okay, tap on it. You could be like, if I only work 6 hours a week and I make $2,000 a week, my family is going to think like it's too easy. Think of the reasons, think of like the worst case scenario. I know it sounds negative, but you want to tap into the negative or like get into the negative so that you can tap it out of your body. Okay. So finally the question is, what else can EFT be applied to in business? Imposter syndrome. Most of us have it. Even if you have all the credentials in the world, you still know there's someone smarter out there. There's someone that knows what they're talking about more. It's kind of like a why me. So like, get out of your head and tap on the reasons why you don't think that you're qualified for this, or you think you're an imposter. Workplace feuds. There's a lot of politics in work. Even if you run your own business, it's not going to be, you're not going to be scot-free of like any sort of conflict. You're going to have people that question you. You're going to have customers that, that tell you you're too expensive, or don't find the value. Well, guess what? Those aren't your customers first off, but they'll find you somehow anyways. So tap on that. Tap on income levels. Okay. Tap on when you want to get to the next income level, write down that goal. Figure out how much you have to sell in order to get there. Look at, if I get here, what's the worst that can happen? What are people going to say to me? Tap on that. Release that from your body. Like, stop carrying around other people's limiting beliefs, that they instill in you, that then somehow become your own at times. And promotions. If you're up for a promotion, when I applied to the MIT bootcamp, the one at MIT Harvard, I tapped on that. I tapped on like, I don't, even though I don't think I'm going to get in, even though I think that my business is too, spiritual or too, energy psychology, it's not traditional medicine. They're not going, it's Harvard. They're not going to like that stuff. Well, guess what? They did. And so like with a promotion, it's like, even though you might not think that you're the best qualified person, You know, there might be somebody that on paper is more qualified, but identify the reasons why you don't think that you're going to get that promotion. Identify the reasons of, if you get the promotion, what are you scared of? What are you scared of that you're not going to live up to? Identify those, tap on it, release it from your body. I know at least 5 high 6 to 7 figure entrepreneurs that have online businesses that use this, and they use it consistently, and they swear, I swear by it, this is how you overcome your beliefs. This is how you overcome these obstacles when you're building a business or even working in a business. This is how you get to the next level. If you keep carrying around those limiting beliefs, it's eventually going to catch up with you, and you're going to subconsciously sabotage yourself in some way. So yeah, that is my best advice, is just tap it out. So I'd like to thank you all for staying with me on this presentation, and you can contact me on LinkedIn if you have any follow-up questions or would just like to connect. I do take on mentees. My last mentee sold her business within like 6 months, sold her startup. I will warn you, I give you an extensive book list of mindset books. I'm willing to share that if you email me, regardless, but I do make people read it so that I know that they're serious about being able to overcome obstacles. And I tell you no a lot. I tell you to slow down a lot, because I know, like I was saying with my medical spa, I know entrepreneurs, we get ahead of ourselves. We want to launch, we want to have customers, we want to hit 6 figures in our first year, we want to hit 7 figures and stuff. And like, you have to have your ducks in a row first. So if you start getting ahead of yourself, you're just going to hear me be like, nope, go back to what I told you to do. Go back to what I told you to do. But that's how you see results. So I just want to thank you. And I believe we're going to open up to questions if there are any.